70 to 80,000 Belgian workers took to the streets of Brussels on Monday, calling on the government to handle skyrocketing living costs. The protests saw transport systems come close to a standstill as demonstrators held strikes at Brussels airport, forcing the cancellation of all departing flights while also halting bus services nationwide. The protests follow an inflation spike of 9% in June for the country as Russia's invasion of Ukraine impacted supplies. Meanwhile, the Belgian Prime Minister said Belgian workers are faring better than their EU counterparts due to their wages being indexed to inflation.
Basically, NATO is in Ukraine, right? And they're funding the wars there. We're saying we want peace, and when we're in NATO, we're not going to have peace.
Why can't we negotiate peace? We have to sit down with all sides. Stop arming. Stop those darn weapons. You know, the cost of those weapons could go to housing and food. And
there are not enough nurses in the hospital to take them out of the ambulance into the hospital and treat them. This happens every day in Hamilton. It's a scandal. There's always money for war. The government spends that kind of money on arms and ammunition and war. There's no money for health care. There's no money for child care. There's no money for climate mitigation. Canada should get out of NATO because it's draining us militarily. It's draining us financially. We should get out of the U.S. Military alliance called NATO. It's time for Canada to become an independent country, act like an independent country, and use its money, use its resources for the benefit of the people rather than the war machine of the U.S.
Now staying in Europe, tens of thousands of protesters gathered in the Czech Republic against the government, the EU and NATO. Under the banner of Czech Republic First, some 70,000 people marched to the capital Prague on Saturday, demanding that the country's coalition take more steps to rein in surging energy costs. Now they called for the ending of sanctions against Russia and to instead establish a new gas supply deal. Protesters also called for the resignation of the country's prime minister and urged the government to stop supplying Ukraine with arms. Opposition to the EU and NATO was also voiced, with the protesters saying that the Czech Republic should be militarily neutral. The protest took place just one day after the country's coalition government survived a no-confidence vote.
Last week, Germany saw a recap of what is happening in parts of Europe. This past Saturday, that is on 8th October, several thousands of protesters gathered at Berlin Reichstag building, which is the lower house of German parliament, raising slogans against their government. Then they held protest march across the city, decrying their government. Today in
sam, kao i drugi građani Srbije, na ovaj skup s jedne strane da podržimo Rusiju, a sa druge strane da kažemo jasno i glasno ne postupcima vlasti u Beogradu koja je donela sramnu odluku o glasanju protiv Rusije u Ujedinjenim nacijama.
braćo i sestre, nema lažne simetrije između zarađenih.
Porque tenemos que salir al exilio de la clase obrera. ¡OTAN no!
NATO kimlik ediyor başa. Bu memleket bizim.